Welcome to VolvoOceanRace.tv, and it's our live coverage of the start of the ultimate leg of the Volvo Ocean Race, leg 10, Stockholm to St Petersburg. My name's Peter Rush. I'm here with Mark Chisnell. We have Knut Frostad out on the water with us. Knut, what does it look like out there today? We're seeing a helicopter picture, and there's an awful lot of boats out there.
It is an awful lot of boats, Peter. We're just having an air show from the Swedish Air Force that you can just hear. 4 jets just flying close to the fleet here. And we're seeing about 11-12 knots of breeze at the moment, so great conditions. A lot of spectator boats, and we're going to have the first reaching start in the race so far, where we have a 90 degrees reach from the start line. So that's going to be a new thing, and you'll see that the boats will get to the first mark really, really close together. I think we'll have an interesting first round to watch here before they head off for St Petersburg. Okay,
thanks, Knut. Mark, Knut telling us a little bit about the racetrack before they get to St Petersburg. They do that one little sausage, and then they're off. Talk us through it.
Yeah, we can see that quick sausage there from the mouth of Santam, the marina there, just on the top left of the picture. It's a reach down. The breeze is northeasterly, about 12 knots, as Knut said, down to the southeast, and then back again to the start area, and then out towards the open ocean, the open Baltic. I say that's not really ocean as it is. It's the Baltic Sea, strictly speaking. And you can see the where they go from there is really a straight run to the east, from Stockholm, Santam, down to St Petersburg in Russia. So that's going to be quite interesting. That's down the Gulf of Finland, so there's going to be land on both sides once they do the initial part of crossing the Baltic. The weather forecast for this northeasterly this afternoon, which has just brought us a perfect day, is of course a big high pressure zone over the northern Baltic Sea. And that, you can see the glorious weather there in those pictures. So it's going to be light-ish. It's going to be light to moderate. The northeasterly and this high pressure will dominate for most of this leg. And the guys are going to be sailing largely upwind to St Petersburg. But that's not going to be such a problem, I don't think. I mean, well, it may be for them, it won't be for us. It'll make it interesting tactically. There's going to be some splits, I'm sure, as these guys go upwind. They'll choose attack and separate away from each other a little bit. And once they get into the Gulf of Finland, the forecast is for the breeze to lighten off as the high pressure moves. And once the breeze starts to lighten off, we may see some shore effects, some sea breezes, some land effects at night. They may even have to pick one shore, the northern or the southern shore, and we could get some big splits and plenty of action. So while this is overall, in overall terms, is once PUMA crossed that start line this afternoon, the leaderboard is settled. This is something of a parade lap, but I think there's plenty of guys who would love to be on the podium for this final lap, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for snakes and ladders on this racecourse, Pete.
Well, thanks, Mark. Again, we're just looking at the number of boats out there. Knut, it doesn't seem like anybody's at work in Stockholm, if not Sweden. They're all out on the race course. An immense number of boats really following on from the import weekend. It looks fantastic out there.
Oh, it looks like a summer holiday out here. It is supposed to be a work day, but we have the Volvo Ocean Race in town, and we have a sunny, warm day with nice breeze in Stockholm. So I guess that's a good enough reason for everyone to take a day off, because it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boats out there. So it's going to be one of those really great starts. And as I speak, the breeze is really picking up. We're just having a PUMA powering process, and I would say they're easily doing a 15, 16 knot boat speed at the moment. So we'll have a really speedy lap now with two reaches at the moment. It's about a 90-degree reach on the first leg from the start line to the buoy. Then they're going to jibe around the mark, and that's a new feature as well. And the reason why we chose to make them jibe was that with a reaching start, they will all come really, really close together. And we could have a situation, if they come really close together to the mark, that they will keep pushing each other to weather, which means that in the end, the first boat run might have a lot of collided with boats that are still about to run. So by jibing, separate them a little bit on the first run and a 90 degrees reach. Back to the start line, so it's going to be two very fast laps in front of us here.
Okay, Knut, and can you tell us, I know you're riding with Jack Lloyd, the race director there, are we looking for an on-time start today?
We are, and as we speak, we just had a 10-minute gun, so 10 minutes left to the start at the moment. That's now 10 seconds ago.
Okay, thanks for that, Knut. Mark, we'll just run through the teams. Those of you who have been following along with us for a few of these legs obviously know the players involved, but we'll start up with Delta Lloyd. And we also, maybe before we do that, actually, we'll talk about a new player that's in town, which is Team Russia. And whilst they are not actually going to be racing on this leg, they did arrive in Stockholm on Wednesday. They had a mountain to climb in terms of getting the boat rule compliant with measurement. They didn't quite get there, but they are going to sail with the fleet. They're not part of the official racing, but they will sail with the fleet into St. Petersburg.
Yeah, that's right. Very much a parade lap for these guys. They're not actually contesting it. They would have made a big difference potentially to the overall leaderboard if they had been racing, because it would have given the potential split in points for if Puma had come last and Telefonica Blue had come first, for Blue to have taken second overall. But they're not contesting this leg, and therefore it is impossible for Blue to catch Puma once Puma crossed the start line this afternoon. So short of hitting a rock or one of the very many of the large number of boats out there, it will be settled once Puma cross that start line.
Okay, so that's Team Russia. They will sit in 8th overall, having suspended racing in Singapore. Delta Lloyd, 7th place overall, and of course skipper Tuni Bermudez, Wouter Verbrack, the crew fairly stable in the last half of this race. They've put up some nice results on certainly the import racing. They've also had some good results in the offshore legs, and in a shorter little sprint like this might be an opportunity for them to get themselves up on the podium.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to all be very much down to sailing skills and sniffing the breeze out at the end there. It's not going to be a speed test, this one, I don't think, once we get into the Gulf of Finland. We are now looking at Ericsson 4 next on the list. Overall winners, obviously. Same crew, the same 11 guys, 37,000 miles, 10 legs, the same people on this boat. That's an absolutely phenomenal record. I think Ilbrook might have done the same thing 8 years ago, but really quite extraordinary when you consider the number of changes that have been on a lot of these other boats. Ericsson 4, overall winners. And
one of the interesting things I think about that, Mark, the stories are coming out that, we've talked about some of the conflict and tension on some of the other boats. And the guys on Ericsson 4 are saying, hey, it's no different for us. We're not all best mates. And in some ways it makes their achievements even more impressive, knowing that they've been able to overcome that and just deal with it on a purely professional level. Their teammates, Ericsson 3, and they're sitting in 4th overall. Skipper Magnus Olsson, well, he's been around forever. He's done the race forever. He was asked at the press conference yesterday if he'd do it again, and not too surprisingly, he hedged his bets. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't think anybody would be surprised to see Magnus still involved with the Volvo Ocean Race when it comes up again in 3 years' time.
No, that's right. We've just had an email into liveblog at volvooceanrace.org, Johan Carlson, saying he thinks it is Magnus's last one, but Magnus himself didn't seem too sure yesterday. So on to Green Dragon, 5th overall. Great result for these guys. They've struggled for pace all the way around when it's been pressured up reaching conditions. They have a new navigator, lots of changes on this boat. Jean-Luc Nilias has come in to replace Ian Moore, who's had to go home. He should be having his second child, well, not him, but his wife, obviously, any day now, so he's had to go home for that. Jean-Luc Nilias stepping in for this final leg on Green Dragon.
Thanks, Mark. And Puma, well, you talked about it already. Puma Ocean Racing Il Mostro, it looks like they're going to be safe for second place as soon as they cross the starting line here. That'll earn them a minimum of 2 points, and that will put them out of reach for Telefonica Blue. We thought that one was going to go down to the wire. It didn't quite. That incident with Telefonica Blue at the last leg start was obviously holding them out, but Puma, they've always the bridesmaids right up until the very end of the race. They were always in second or third place. It certainly seemed that way anyways. They finally won an import contest in Galway. They've won the leg over here, and now second place overall. The boys are on a roll on Puma.
That's right. Next on the list, Telefonica Blue. The big contest has been between these two boats for second overall, right up until Telefonica Blue hit that rock in Marstrand. Again, a very stable crew. No changes into this leg for these guys. Injuries have affected them more than anything else, I think. They traded navigators, Simon Fisher and Tom Addis, around the world. Simon doing the inshores, the ports stuff, and Tom taking over offshore from, I think it was leg 3 or 4 onwards. So Telefonica Blue, again, a very solid, consistent crew, and third overall as soon as Puma crossed the line this afternoon.
All right, Canute. Canute, we'll come to you to talk us into that 5-minute gun, and then we'll finish off with Telefonica Black.
4, 3, 2, 1, 5 minutes.
Now, Canute, you've actually got an interesting tale to tell about final legs into races, because if I remember correctly with D-Juice, you guys did something pretty special for the final sprint in that race.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we knew it was going to be quite light going down to Kiel in Germany, so we had not much to lose, really, because we were fighting for 6th place and nothing better those days, and we decided to take off 40% of our crew and save all of we could possibly do, and the wind died overnight, and we came along and basically by big margin. So it is possible to do something spectacular on the last leg. On this leg now they have in front of them, they start upwind with quite a good pace. So there's not too much to do on the cruise side other than sailing as well as you can. What my experience, I actually have done a race before to St Petersburg. We did it with the trimarans 3 years ago. And, the thing we experienced was that we got closer to Russia, the wind dies, and it gets lighter and lighter, and especially on this wind direction we're experiencing here. So I think it can be whatever happens midway on this leg. This leg will not be over before they're really, really close to the finish. So it can be an exciting leg all the way to the last mile here, actually, of who's going to pull it and win it.
All right, Knut. Well, that dovetails nicely with the last boat to introduce Telefonica Black, because skipper Fernando Echevarria, I spoke to him when they finished this leg, and he brought it up again at the press conference yesterday, saying, we really, really want to win a leg. Now, it's not going to affect their overall position. They're 6th overall, but that is a team that maybe desperate isn't the right word, but they're certainly motivated, and they would really, really desperately like to find themselves on top of the podium in one of these offshore legs. And that boat, Mark, in the lighter conditions, it might be pretty slippery. Yeah,
absolutely. There's no question that these are the conditions for that boat to win a leg. Along with Telefonica Blue, I think where everybody in the fleet knows that light to medium upwind, they're the two boats to watch. And they've got those, there was a review yesterday which is really interesting on the website of everybody commenting on innovations in the boats. And the thing that came up over and over again was the mast in these two Telefonica boats. If you only have to look at it to see how much lighter and less windage there is on it, it's got around the world. There was a bit of skepticism about it in Alicante. It might have been a little bit a step too far, but it's certainly been strong enough. They haven't had any rig problems, and I'm sure it's part of the reason why these boats are such weapons upwind.
All right, well, Knut, we've got just under 2.5 minutes to go to the start of the last leg of this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race. How are things looking down at water level, and what are you seeing? What kind of sails are these guys going to be flying when they go across the line?
Well, I mean, most guys have the same sail. They have their big Genoa up, which is Genoa Reacher, and I would assume that most of them will have the staysail. The only one I see with the staysail at the moment is Delta Lloyd, which is a bit surprising. And Delta Lloyd is also having the Code Zero up. So, and that seems to be the only boat that's going for that kind of set. So that's interesting. One boat going very different than the others. And if they can hold that Code Zero, it's clearly going to be an advantage for them. But it's a big, powerful sail, and the breeze has been growing a little bit. Sorry, I have to correct myself, because I'm just looking at Telefonica Black, and they also run the Code Zero and the staysail. So in total, that will mean that those two boats are going for at least 100 square meters more of sails than the rest of the fleet. And that is taking some risk. But there you go, the two last boats on the scoring board, and they have everything to win. So it's clear that both Telefonica Black and Delta Lloyd is going for the most sail at the start. The rest of the fleet all have the same setup with a full-size Genoa.
Okay, thanks, Knut. Just over 1 minute to go. We'll come back to you to talk us through the start. But quickly, Mark, Navigator's time on distance on a reaching start. It's everything, isn't it?
It is, and I think the guys will have both ends of this line pinged into the computer boxes, and it'll be doing the calculations for them on the final approach here. Of course, you've also got to juggle that with all the boats that are around you, so you've got plenty on in this start line, even though it isn't an upwind start as we would normally see in the import racing. This is a reaching start, and we'll go over to Knut now to talk us into this one.
Yeah, Knut, how are they lining up?
Well, we have 30 seconds left to the start, and at least 3 of the boats are in their final approach. Delta Lloyd have the Code Zero up, and this is all about timing, really. I think it's really left with their attacking into 25 seconds, which is going to make them extremely late in acceleration for the start. But basically, the whole name of the game in the reaching start is to have the best speed across the line, because if you have pace, you can very quickly outpace another boat that's stopping. And 10 seconds left to the start. I would say that some of the boats might a little early, like Puma, but we're just having the start there, and there was the gun. And all the boats were clear, and Telefonica Blue, Ericsson 4, and Puma had the best start, clearly.
Okay, thanks, Knut. Telefonica Blue, Puma, and Ericsson 4. Well, they're the leaders on the overall leaderboard, and they're the leaders early. But, Mark, what's going on here with Delta Lloyd and Ericsson? Very close action there.
Yeah, I think they've got a problem getting clear wind, and that's the real issue. If you can't get your nose poked out and you've got the speed, as Knut said, you're going to be smothered by the guys to windward. And I think Ericsson trying to get themselves out of trouble there with Delta Lloyd and the boats to windward. Puma in the middle of the line on the right-hand side of the picture there. Great pace, punching out from this line in really good shape. I would suspect that that's Ericsson 4, given their record of starting. That one there, it's hard to tell from this distance, but also another great start from these guys. So it's not long, this reaching leg. It's going to be full on up here as they power towards the first mark of leg 10. Okay,
Knut, can you tell us the speeds they're making now? Because from the pictures we're seeing, they're absolutely flying along.
No, I think they're doing 15, 16 knots, Peter. And clearly the Ericsson 4, Puma and Telefonica Blue had the best pace. They were closest to the line, and it's really difficult to pass another boat on a reaching leg like this. But it's going to be interesting to see how Delta Lloyd and Telefonica Black are doing with those big sails. At the moment, I can see Delta Lloyd being much more powered up than the Green Dragon to either of them. And quite a disappointing for the Ericsson 3. They were really behind and didn't seem to be switched off. But as I speak now, Telefonica Blue and Puma seem to be a bit more upright. So maybe a touch less breeze further out. And if there's less wind further out, that would mean that the guys with the bigger sails have a nice payoff when they get closer to the mark.
Okay, Knut, Mark, a fantastic shot of the three leaders there, ducks in a row. Ericsson 4 down to leeward, then Puma, Telefonica Blue up to weather are the other two. Those are our overall leaders, and they are the leaders very early here on leg 10. The fleet's going to punch out, going on a reaching leg around that mark. They'll jibe, and that's going to be a pretty interesting turn as well. There's going to be an awful lot of work going on deck there.
That's right. This first mark, they'll be leaving it to starboard. Again, not like the import racing where they go around to port. So the boat on the inside here is actually the one down to leeward, Ericsson 4. So if they can keep their breeze clear, they have the inside track on the turn back towards the starting area. So right now, as long as Ericsson 4 can keep their wind clear, they have got the edge. There's a slightly different angle on all three boats. You can see there's a bit of separation. So the guys to leeward, Ericsson 4, a little tighter wind angle. And the guys to windward, Telefonica Blue, a little wider wind angle because they're coming down to the mark. So that will also affect their speed depending on whether the wind goes up or down. I'd say generally Blue will want more pressure and Ericsson 4 will want less.
Okay, now if you're wondering about Team Russia, well, the agreement, we told you that they're back, but they're not racing, and the agreement is once the fleet makes this one circuit, this one lap, they go back through the starting line and then head off towards Finland, Russia, and St. Petersburg, and that's when Team Russia will fall in line just behind them and shadow the fleet the rest of the way. So look for Team Russia coming up, but early on, they're not sailing in this part of the race. Knut, where are you on the racetrack, and what are you seeing down there?
Well, Peter, I'm just heading for the mark. They're going around to be ready to watch the rounding, because I think this is going to be one of the most interesting mark roundings in the whole race, actually, with the whole fleet coming very close together. And as you know, the boat that has third position will be the stronger boat tactically, because they can basically keep their position and require the space they need to do the rounding. But however, they might be struggling here with Puma and Telefonica Blue, who might be able to overhaul them, and if they do, that's going to be a tough one for them because they can be rolled by little. But at the moment, it's looking very even between Puma and Ericsson, but it seems to me that Puma has a little edge at the moment, sort of moving forward on Ericsson 4.
The crucial thing here is, of course, whether or not they're overlapped as they come into this mark, so whether or not the bow of Ericsson 4 is ahead of the stern of Puma. If they are, they can call for rights, call for water at this mark, and turn inside. If they aren't, then they can't. So it's going to be crucial just how far Ericsson 4, because I think she is, it looks from our helicopter picture there, Knut, that she is dropping back. That Puma and Telefonica Blue out to windward are punching forward a little bit. And Ericsson 4 is struggling a little with the pace. If they can't keep that overlap as they come into this mark, then they will have to round behind. Right now, it looks to us from the helicopter shots like Puma have the advantage.
Well, a great shot there of the entire 7-boat fleet. Telefonica Blue is up on the top left of your screen. Puma, Ericsson 4, those are the three leaders. Then it looks like it's Green Dragon, Telefonica Black down to leeward, and trailing the fleet at the back, Ericsson 3, Delta Lloyd. Pretty much the same alignment in terms of being upwind or downwind, but very close action here, and it's going to be tense to see whether Puma can break that overlap around clear ahead of Ericsson 4. If they can't, it should be all on as they go around the mark. Knut, any changes there? What's happening?
Oh, yeah, there's a big change, Peter. I mean, basically, what happened was what we said, that the Puma basically overtook Ericsson. And Ericsson 4 is being hosed by all the boats to weather, basically. So that's the big risk of being lured boat in the reaching start, is that if you can't keep your position, you'll be overtaken by everyone that's the weather of you. Because as soon as you're in the shadow of the first boat, you'll be in the shadow of every single boat coming behind that other boat, the weather of you. So Ericsson 4 now, I'm pretty confident they'll be over.
Yeah,
behind both Puma and Telefonica Blue, and they're struggling to keep up with Green Dragon, and might even struggle with even Ericsson in the end. So it's a really difficult position for Torben, because he's now really well covered by Green Dragon, and he's struggling to get up, and the breeze is dropping, so he's trying to go for a code zero, but the Telefonica Blue and Puma has in the front, and now, as I speak, Telefonica Blue is the race leader at the moment.
Yeah, we're riding with Ericsson 4 there, and we saw Green Dragon, as Knut described, just coming cruising across the bow of the overall race winner. Green Dragon in great shape from that windward position. And the sails, I think you could see on Ericsson 4 and on Puma there, was sheeted in pretty tight. I think a little tighter than the start, so maybe we've had a right-hand shift, and that is never going to help the boat to leeward either. Great shot of Puma there. The guy's just doing a little tweak on the mainsail. A man grinding in the middle there, turning those handles with a white top on.
Well, indeed, Il Mostro and Telefonica Blue now battling at the head of the fleet. They were fighting for second place overall, and it looks like that's going to go to Puma, but Telefonica Blue maybe just able to lead them out and around this first mark, and would not be something if Bauer Becking's men can recover from that horrific start that they had in Marstrand. They've already come back. They won the import race, and now currently I think they're leading the fleet here, just sliding in ahead of Puma as they approach this top mark, Knut. Knut,
yeah, I'm just interesting because Telefonica Blue has hoisted their code zero as well, and in that hoist it way at least 2 boats to Puma, and I think the breeze is actually picking up again, and it could be that Puma is doing the right thing here, sticking to the same sail, not trying out too many combinations, because if the breeze sail, and you can't say that Delta Lloyd and Telefonica Black had any benefit from having a bigger sail, so I would say that Puma at the moment is very strong here, not changing sails and keeping the same setup as they get to the mark. And it's a lot easier to drive as well with that 10 and jump with the big curve there.
Okay, Knut, audio just breaking up a little bit there, and we'll try and get a stronger connection with Knut Frostad out on the water. But, well, there they are, Mark, all in a row, lined up, ducks in a row, as we're on board. I think that's with Green Dragon there, looking in behind. On Telefonica Blue, maybe looking in at the fleet behind.
Yeah, I think I agree. That looks like the graphics on the left-hand side of the sail of one of the Telefonica boats. And green top to the sail behind them, which you think would be Green Dragon, but that means that those guys have gone past Ericsson 4, which I think we saw, so somewhere down to leeward of that picture is Puma, I assume, and there's a little bit of wake popping up there on the left-hand side that might well, off the back of the mainsail, that may well be Puma's. So I think we are looking on board from the race leader back at the fleet as they approach this first turning mark of Leg 10. So they're going to leave this mark to starboard, turn round at a right-hand turn, right-hand down. And there's Puma, a helicopter shot. I think these guys are in second place now. See that sail going out, so we're going round the mark. So we're riding with Puma around this mark, so I guess that means that they're in the lead.
So Puma is in the lead after just rounding the mark here, and going for the code zero. So they might be saving the code zero for the run back.
Okay, Knut, we're on board again with the Il Mostro. They're the leaders around the mark. Telefonica Blue just in behind them in second place. Third place, Green Dragon, Mark, and it looks like Ericsson 4 going around in fourth place. All the teams jibing well before the mark and trying to hold that windward position as they go around. And it looks like Telefonica Black is going to be fifth place.
That's right. Lots of sails flogging as they come around this mark as they try to get those big sails sheeted on the new jibe. Plenty of action there on, you can see Ericsson 4 we're riding with at the moment, winding that sail back in on the new side. And that looks like a sail change on Ericsson 4, as Knut was describing. They going for a different sail for the second leg, and it looks like a much wider wind angle to me, so more sail error I suspect up on Ericsson 4 now.
Well, and indeed, and if you were looking and saw Shirley Robertson crossing the camera there with CNN's mainsail, she's sailing to St Petersburg with them. And you can look for a full report on CNN on Ericsson 4 and the Volvo Ocean Race in the coming weeks. But there's a nice shot. Green Dragon, third place. Ericsson 4 in fourth. And then Telefonica Black and Ericsson 3. A pretty close tussle, it looked like there, for fifth and sixth. and Delta Lloyd trailing the fleet. But it's Puma, Il Mostro. They've been at the head of the fleet an awful lot lately, Mark, and they're doing it again.
Yeah, this guy's really coming good in the second half of the race. It was interesting that once the hope of the overall win had slipped away from them, they really started to turn the afterburners on and show us what they could do. So, fantastic second half of the race to take the second place overall. They've now got it in the bag. They've started this leg. They get 2 points, and that's enough to make the difference. An impossible gap to bridge for Telefonica Blue, who are chasing them up this leg as we speak, in fact. So these two guys still at it.
Well, Telefonica Blue, Il Mostro, they're at the front of the fleet. They are your third place, Telefonica Blue. Second place, Puma's Il Mostro in the overall standings, as we see on board with the guys on Il Mostro. They did have one of the few crew changes. Back on board is Jerry Kirby off, Justin Ferris, as Kirby steps in for the short final sprint to St Petersburg, and he'll be happy to be back with his buddy Kenny Reed.
That's right, long-standing sailing relationship between these two guys. They've done a lot of miles together, and Kenny making sure there's a space on the boat for Jerry as he rejoined the race after having to take a couple of legs off for personal reasons. So great to see Jerry back on board. Justin, I believe, has gone home to where his wife is having a child as well. Lots of babies in this Volvo fleet, Pete. Not like the old days. Not like the old days.
And just doing the math, there's a lot of activity before the start in that case. Now looking at Telefonica Blue, Mark, what's going on with the head sail there? Because they seem to have trouble getting it filled.
Yeah, there's definitely a big problem there. I'm not sure whether that's a sail change that's gone wrong or quite what's going on. It's getting sheeted on now, so got some more sail problems on the Telefonica Blue. Gap closing a little bit to Ericsson 4 coming up behind them. But these are all fairly decent gaps now. I think the fleet has extended as they came into that turn and away from it. So Puma quite safe with their lead. Telefonica Blue not going to get caught just yet.
Okay, and Canute, I think we've got you back with a slightly cleaner audio track. What are you seeing? Because the boats, they're heading back towards that start line. They'll go through it again, and then they're off and free to sail to St. Petersburg.
Well, what I'm seeing is that the fleet is obviously more spread out now than it was on the first leg, but it's quite interesting that Telefonica Blue have kept the Code Zero furled up in the front, and they haven't really used it, which means that they're just dragging a lot of air drag, really, and not getting much out of it. In fact, it looks to me like Telefonica Blue is about to drop the Code Zero, so they decided it wasn't really worth it, and they have really given away a lot of distance to Puma by sailing with that sail up there without using it. So it seems that Puma is really confident about the sail setup they have. They're happy about the Genoa, and everybody else who have tried a different sail setup has not really gained from it. I can see Ericsson 4 with a big Code Zero behind Green Dragon, and Green Dragon with a smaller Genoa is managing to keep Ericsson 4 behind him. And this should normally be Green Dragon's worst conditions, because it's a 90 degrees reach, it's fully powered up, and we know that Green Dragon has a smaller boat than Ericsson 4, and I've always been struggling in these conditions, so it doesn't look like bigger is better at the moment.
Yeah, with just pictures there, Knut, as you were talking and describing that, of Pepe Ribes battling to get that Code Zero down on Telefonica Blue, wrestling to get it onto the windward side of the sail that's up, so that they can drop it onto the foredeck and not into the water to leeward. So, yeah, plenty of work getting that sail down, even though it's been slowing them up.
Yeah, it did seem like they were really struggling with it there, Knut. We've got a nice shot on board Green Dragon there, and some nice pace shown by Ian Walker and his men. They're up battling with the leaders in third place currently. And we're back riding with Telefonica Blue, Mark. They still don't have that Code Zero on the correct side where it's easy for them to lower it down. And it looks like they might concede and try and drop it on the leeward side of the boat now.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting, actually, because it's not far from the water dropping it that side. And that could go really pretty messy for them quite quickly if they lose control of the halyard. So it's not for want of trying that they can't get that sail down. They know it's slowing them up, and they're pretty anxious to get it down, but it's not proven as easy as they'd like.
All right, Knut, what are you seeing from your vantage point down low at water level?
Well, I'm just with Puma, and that Puma have stretched a lot. They probably doubled at least the lead they had at the last mark. And I will give a lot of them to actually stick to the same combination and not go for that bigger sail, because big is not always good. You know, here what you see that Ericsson 4 is heeling over a lot more than the sister ship Ericsson 3. And I would say that the Ericsson 3 has actually been catching up to Ericsson 4. thin surroundings. So this is very much about sticking to what you know is working, and really working the boats really hard. And I can see that the Puma guys are very confident, and they really work the boat. They don't play around on the foredeck, and that seems to work for them.
All right, Knut. Well, Puma is our leader. Telefonica Blue, Green Dragon, Ericsson 4, Ericsson 3, Telefonica Black, and Delta Lloyd. That's the order as they approach the starting line again. They'll tack through the start line here, Mark. Then they'll be free. And once all the boats have gone around, then we could expect to possibly see Team Russia joining the fleet and sailing with them the rest of the way into St. Petersburg. But here we go. They're not very far from that start line now.
Oh, that's right. And Puma is going to lead in here. Looking like they'll be first away and out of Sandham. Headed for, there's a couple of marks they've got to go around on the way out, the same ones that the lighthouses that they went past on the way in here. They've got to go past Svengen and Revengegrunt, both to starboard, and then there's a mark to port before they're free to head for St. Petersburg. Well,
good breeze here at the start, but it is forecast to go light the closer they get to Russia, and we have an ETA currently of sometime on Saturday morning. And it's a pretty critical ETA because once they get into St. Petersburg, clear customs, there's a couple of bridges that have to go up, and those don't normally go up during the day. So to try and get the fleet in, it is critical that they make it there on time. But the ETA looking good now, and if they can get a quick start, Knut, that will certainly set them on their way.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always advantage getting ahead in front. What I can see in the back now is that Ericsson 4 is furling up their Cod Zero and realizing that this was not a good idea, it didn't work for us. So the same thing is happening with Telefonica Black. They basically tried something here that didn't work very clearly, and they're taking a big loss for it. So both the boats with the big monster Cod Zeros are rolling it up at the moment.
It's pretty interesting that after all these thousands and thousands of miles of training that they can still get the wrong sail at a particular wind angle and wind speed, isn't it? Don't you think, Knut?
Absolutely. It's so much for two-boat testing, right? It's taking them 37,000 miles to figure out that this doesn't work. It's interesting.
Hopefully they'll log that one in their polar tables and not make that mistake again.
Well, Mark, I'm just seeing in our view here, we've got Team Russia sailing around under mainsail fairly close to Puma there, although I think probably the lens distorting how close they actually are. But Team Russia is in the start area and will sail with the fleet the rest of the way home to St. Petersburg, and it's great to see them. It's great in the end that they aren't going to have an impact on the overall leaderboard. But it will be nice to see them sailing with the rest of the fleet on their way home. And Knut, we've got Puma going around, leading the fleet through the start line again.
Yeah, Puma's just run to speak, and they are heading out again for the last time, pointing at St. Petersburg. So this is going to be the last time we see them in the Volvo Ocean this time, at least from a starting area. And I'm sure Puma's going to go for a leg win again. They've done tremendously well at the end of the race here, and they're act together. So it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out. But I thought the forecast is that it's going to drop towards Russia, which means that you'll probably see a compression. So although it's always good to be in the lead, nothing is guaranteed on this leg, that's for sure.
Some potentially very interesting choices coming as they get into the Gulf of Finland. If there's no breeze in the middle offshore, they've got a choice of coast to go for as well. So I think there's going to be plenty of options once they get closer to the finish. It could all get really mixed up. And of course they're all pretty tired now, and I think as we've seen in the last couple of legs, as they get tireder, it's when mistakes start to get made tactically and strategically, and we could have a pretty interesting end to this one.
Well, Il Mostro, the first boat around, and now Telefonica Blue just tacking around that mark as they come through the start line again, leave the pin to starboard this time and throw the tack in, point the bow at Russia, and off they go. So second place after this first loop to Telefonica Blue, and just in behind them is Green Dragon, Mark, and that's a nice position for the Dragon.
Yeah, they got that position, that overtaking manoeuvre, as Ericsson 4 had to come up from a leeward position with the sails sheeted on hard. Green Dragon just rolled down across the top of them from their slightly more windward starting position. So another nice tidy start from Ian Walker and his boys to hold that third place, but Ericsson 4 and Ericsson 3 chomping at the bit, not far behind. You can see the difference in the speed there, even despite that wrestling with the wrong sail up for a while. That Ericsson 4 is still right behind Green Dragon.
Yeah, Torben Grail just tacking around the mark, and sister ship Ericsson 3 not very far behind at all. So those are your fourth and fifth place boats. And Knut, I'm looking at Telefonica Black as they approach the mark as well. There's really not much between Ericsson 4 and Telefonica Black, those three.
No, it isn't. I mean, and the interesting thing is that just lost a lot of distance on that leg trying that bigger sail. And once what you lose having the wrong sail, the other thing is what you lose in the maneuvers. And they have lost so much distance that the Ericsson 3 is almost right behind them, and just a boat length and a half. So that tells you a bit about how important it is to know your inventory and know the gears to shift. So I'm a bit surprised, really, that Torben and the guys went for that. But there's always somebody on board who might have a different opinion.
Okay. Knut, it sounds like we've got an awful lot of people trying to talk on the same channel you're on. Just breaking up a little bit there, and we were seeing Delta Lloyd, Mark. They tacked around the start line. Seemed like a slow tack. They're in 7th place, but it wasn't one of their better tacks.
It wasn't. There's a lot to happen on these boats when you tack. It's not just a question of running to the other side of the boat and swapping the sails around. There's the canting keel to move as well, and they really just stopped the thing dead on that mark. Were very, very slow to accelerate away from it. So that gap, I suspect, will have opened between 6th and 7th, but when we see it again. But the other gap that's open is between 1st and 2nd, and Puma are just streaking away. The forecast was for more breeze offshore, and initially at least I suspect we're going to see Puma extend away as they get into that better pressure away from the coast.
Well, there is a great shot of Il Mostro, and you'd have been hard-pressed to get a picture of just one boat on your TV screen. But our helicopter pilot, cameraman up there, Matt Connor, he's managed to do it. Just Il Mostro and a lot of open water around them. Of course, as you pan around and look behind, it's probably going to get a little bit more crowded. But one thing with the race being so quick here and them being on these reaching angles, Mark, it's going to be difficult for the spectator fleet to keep up.
That's right. The pace these guys are going to be going at now, I think we're going to be seeing them moving at 15, 16 knots as they were on the initial part of this leg, and it's just going to get faster from here. So it's flat water, perfect conditions for these boats, fully powered up. They really are going to stretch their legs, and you need a pretty potent speedboat to keep up with these machines now.
Well, one person who's in a potent speedboat, Knut Frostad, what are you seeing down there just now as they streak away from Sandham and head towards Russia?
Well, I'm just to weather of Telefonica Black, really, and what is great to see is that as they rounded the last mark, the whole spectator fleet has decided to set off after the boats, and behind me it's just a whole ocean covered with boats and spray and white water. I've never seen more power boats or sailboats anywhere behind me, actually. And they're all to follow the course of the sailors. So Team Russia is just in the middle of it all with boats all over here. It's quite interesting to see that none of the boats have actually hoisted their stay sails, but I guess they're all planning to go hard on the wind as soon as they get out of the archipelago and start sailing upwind. And the big choice they have to make early now is whether they want to hike, go across on port tack, or whether they want to start getting closer to the Finnish coast early. And I saw the discussions this morning from the meteorologists on the Ericsson team, and they really were discussing these two options, giving very different outcome.
Well, we've just had a great shot there, Knut, of Ericsson 4. There's the Fleet Broadband Express coming into view as well. But on the bow of Ericsson 4, Mark, flat water, it's still a miserably wet job.
Yeah, it's remarkable there. You think it's perfect sunny day, flat water. There's really, there's breeze, but there's not a huge amount, 10, 12 knots. And I'm not sure whether that was Phil Jameson or Ryan Godfrey, but whoever it was getting wet from very, very early on in this leg, in conditions when on most sailboats you'd be sitting there dry as a bone.
Well, there we are on board with Ericsson, and Shirley Robertson there on board Ericsson 4. And we can see the guys moving around, and they're into stacking mode now. We saw that a little bit earlier on Puma as well. They're going to be set up on this port tack for, well, how long?
For a while.
For a long time, at least 20 hours.
And they're, you can see from the red boots and the gaiters on the guy on the main sheet there that they're expecting some weather. It's just always wet on these boats, and of course we're in the Baltic. That water's pretty cold, so as soon as it starts coming over the bow and back down the deck, it isn't going to be quite as warm and sunny.
Well, Team Russia will be joining the fleet, trying to keep up. And Knut, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how they're doing. We've got a nice shot of them there on the helicopter. They are, as you described it, in the midst of that huge spectator fleet following the Volvo Ocean race boats. And we can see Kasatka there, the Russian boat, heading for Russia for the very first time, Knut.
Well, I think they're doing all right. I mean, it took them quite a bit of time to get up to speed, and they weren't really powered up before they had let Delta Lloyd get quite far away from them. But Team Russia it's quite a stiff boat. It has a lot of stability, and it should be doing quite okay reaching-wise. So now in the beginning, if they still have some of that pace left, they should be doing okay. But you have to remember that Team Russia has been out of the race for quite a long time now, and these boats just keep getting faster and faster through the race as they learn more and more, and they train them better, they race them better, they steer them better. And she'll probably find that the boats around her are faster than when last time she raced against them.
Well, Team Russia indeed. Kasatka heading home for the first time, heading to St. Petersburg, and the team founder and owner, Oleg, he's on board. He's working the bow, and Stig Vestergaard taking over as skipper for this trip to St. Petersburg for Team Russia. But Mark, it's nice for them. It's nice to see them back. It's also nice for them, I would imagine, to be in amongst this crowd and all these spectator boats around them.
Yeah, they're very much leading the charge as the spectator fleet set off to try and track these boats out into the Baltic. And you can see there from the helicopter shots just quite how many boats there are riding shotgun with the fleet as they head out now towards Russia, headed east. And the next big thing that will happen really is something that we should just give you a heads up on is that I think it's 27 degrees and 50 minutes. There is a decision to be made on whether or not they do an extra triangle or whether the course is actually shortened depending on the wind conditions. So we won't know exactly what the route is to St. Petersburg until we get to that point when the race office will decide on the final leg.
All right, Knut, whereabouts are you? Are you able to keep up with the front boats, or are you starting to slide further back in the fleet?
So I'm still with the two Ericsson boats, Peter, so and nothing has really changed apart from the fact that Green Dragon has fallen off a little bit. She's aimed for a more lured position, and the two Ericsson boats have been catching up. It's also interesting to see other boats.
Okay, Knut, again, just breaking up a little bit at the end there, but we could see as you were speaking on that helicopter shot exactly what you were saying. Green Dragon just sliding down to leeward, the two Ericsson boats climbing up a little bit. It looked like, Mark, Ericsson 3 maybe the furthest to windward, Ericsson 4 in the middle there. And as the fleet racing out of Sandham, 400 miles this leg to St. Petersburg, and normally, well, they can do 400 miles in a day. That's not going to happen this time. We're expecting it to take certainly upwards of 36 hours, but hopefully not too much upwards of that.
Strictly speaking, I think they can do 400 miles in 16 hours, if my maths is correct. Yeah, it's going to take a little longer than that. These are obviously not ideal conditions for it's not big breeze downwind, which is when that 600, almost, I should say, it's 596 miles and change, when that record was set in the South Atlantic on leg 1 by Ericsson 4. But 400 miles, it's going to take probably 24 to 36 hours, I think close to 36 looking at the forecast. But it's not going to take much to power these boats up and keep them romping along, especially upwind with the code zeros up. Even when it drops really light down to the 5-6 knot range, they're still pushing along boat speed 7-8 knots.
Well, there we have another great view of the fleet. We're on board with Puma there. That's the camera on the mast looking back into the cockpit. And you can see just how fast they're sliding along, taking a look at the water slipping by down the leeward rail there on board Il Mostro. Skipper Kenny Reed, well, it's not his first go at the Volvo, but it's his first go as a skipper, leading a team and being front and center. And he's had a pretty good run of it here, Mark. Second place overall for Il Mostro. And now that they've made that start, they will finish ahead of Telefonica Blue on the overall leaderboard, really no matter what happens here. And, well, I think if you'd have told him in October that second place was where he'd end up, he probably would have taken that. He's a competitive guy. He might not have taken it with a smile, but I think there's nothing to be ashamed of a second place finish here for Puma.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reports were that he was really, really disappointed with that second place into Cape Town at the end of leg 1, and it kind of felt like they thought they were up there with a chance of winning this, but in the end, Ericsson 4 has just stretched away with better preparation, longer preparation time, a little bit more just longer, just longer to do everything. I think that's the thing with these boats. There is so much involved. It's so complex. We've just seen with Ericsson 4 make a poor sail choice on that sausage right at the end of 37,000 miles. You can see how complicated it is to always get the right sail up at the right time, and it's so expensive to change them. It's going to cost you anywhere between 2 and 4 miles to do a good change in these boats when they're offshore. So you put the wrong sail up, that's just an extra 2 miles, because you just got to change it back to the one that you came from, or the one that you think you're now going to go to. You make 2 of those mistakes, it's 4 miles. You do it twice in a 3-hour sked, and all of a sudden, in a lot of conditions, you've gone 3-4 places down the fleet. So it does. Time on the water is just invaluable in these boats ahead of the race start. And I think we saw that when Ericsson 4 just pushed away from everybody on leg 1. And it's an old adage that first into Cape Town wins the race, and it's been true again this time around. Good to see, just before we switch, that is a clean shot on that lens there. Ricky Depp has obviously cleaned that one. He hadn't cleaned the looking aft shot. I don't know if he gets dock points for that on the media prize. Ricky Depp in line for the big one at the end of this race. Obviously pretty competitive, these guys, him and Gustav. They've already sent a blog in before this leg had even started. Both of them are after that final prize.
Well, Knut, we're on board with Puma. We can see they've got everybody stacked up on the windward side, on the high side, trying to balance the boat down. What are you seeing from your vantage point? Where are you?
I'm just with Telefonica Black, Peter, and we actually decided to stop our boat here and just let the whole spectator fleet overtake us. But it clearly looks like the 2 Ericsson boats are about to pass the Green Dragon boat. The Green Dragon boat tends to look a bit upright, which is a bit strange. They're supposed to have less stability, and they look a bit sort of out. The 2 Ericsson boats are powering forward. And I'm amazed the distance Telefonica managed to get on the rest of the fleet this early. And Team Russia has, as I speak, the Delta Lloyd, so they seem to still have some speed in it.
Well, that's good to hear. Team Russia getting back into the mix, approaching up against Delta Lloyd. We're on board there with Telefonica Blue, as they're in second place just now. Behind them, Green Dragon, the 2 Ericsson boats, and Delta Lloyd and Team Russia bringing up the rear. It's perfect conditions for the start. Bright, sunny day, excellent wind, flat water, an enormous spectator fleet. What more could you want to finish the Volvo Ocean Race, Mark?
A fast leg to Petersburg. Petersburg, Pete, a fast leg. I think everybody, reading the blogs we already had come in from Gustav Morin saying how tired everybody is, and it's been going on a long while, and they're toast now, basically. I think particularly for those guys, I suspect, in Stockholm, they've been coming home. They've had to deal with a lot more stuff that you don't have to deal with in places like Cape Town, India, and in the way of friends and family. Everybody wants a little, to chat to the lads and get the stories, and it's been an exhausting stopover for those guys on Ericsson 3. They'll be glad to get this done, I suspect.
Well, there we go. We're up in the helicopter, riding high above the Volvo Ocean Race fleet as Puma leading the 8-boat fleet again out of Stockholm en route to St Petersburg, some 400 miles away, somewhere around 36 hours, we think. We're looking for a finish on Saturday morning, and the guys on Il Mostro, they're in the lead now. They'd like nothing more than to be the first boat into Russia. I think they had that nice big banner up there, "To Russia with Love," as they left the dock this morning. So they're definitely keen to get going and get themselves into St. Petersburg. The guys down off the rail here, Mark, doing a little bit of work on the boat, a bit of sail trimming and adjustments. It does look like everybody's hard on the wind here now.
Yeah, and I suspect that's, as we were saying earlier on, once they got out here, that they would come on the wind. It is an upwind leg largely at the moment, I think, and they'll be putting those boats on the breeze as they get out clear of the final 2 lighthouses that they've got around. So, yeah, we're going to start to lose touch with them pretty soon, I think, Pete. We've seen the connection with Knut getting a little bit sketchy as they stretch away from the coast. And I think we're going to wave goodbye to them pretty soon, and we'll be switching over to the standard position reporting and, of course, the live blog.
Well, indeed. If you followed us on Leg 9, you'll know that Mark Chisnell, Cameron Kelleher, I was out on the Fleet Broadband Express. We were trying to bring you 24-hour coverage of Leg 9. We're planning to do the same thing on Leg 10. Mark will be jumping into a rib as soon as we wrap things up here, streaking back to Stockholm and getting online to bring you the latest from the fleet. And, of course, I'll have a little bit of help along the way from myself. Hopefully Cameron, Riath, the full cast of characters will be involved in getting you and the fleet back to St. Petersburg. So make sure you follow along with us online with that. We'll have all the pictures in from the start from Rick Tomlinson, Dave Neal, and we'll be getting that online and up to date as soon as we possibly can. But for now, for Knut Frostad, Chisnell, Volvo Ocean Race TV, the whole crew here, I'm Peter Rush. Thanks for joining us just now, and make sure you follow along with us for the next 24 hours.